My name is David Rains, and I want to tell you something before this story begins. I am not a soldier. I am not a hero. I am just a man who lost everything, and then decided that losing everything meant he had nothing left to be afraid of. The Sulkai came to Varen 3 on a Tuesday morning. I remember that detail clearly because I had been awake since before dawn running maintenance checks in the underground supply tunnels, and I remember thinking that Tuesday mornings were always the slowest part of the week. I heard the first impact above me and I thought it was an equipment failure somewhere in the upper levels. Then I heard the second, then the third, then the sound changed into something I had never heard before, and I stopped thinking and started running. I ran deeper into the tunnels, and I kept running until the floor stopped shaking, and the sounds above me faded into a silence that felt wrong in a way I could not immediately name. When I came up 3 hours later, I understood why the silence felt wrong. Varen 3 was gone. 12,000 people. The colony where my wife had grown a garden on a planet that had never had gardens before. The school where my daughter had learned to read in 3 languages because she said one was not enough. The neighbors who always argued about whose turn it was to fix the water relay and never actually fixed it. Gone. All of it. In the time it had taken me to run to the bottom of a tunnel and back. I will not describe the days that followed in detail, because some things do not need to be described. I will only say that I sat in the ashes of Varen 3 for 3 days, and on the 4th morning something inside me went very quiet and very cold and very certain. And I stood up and walked to the only ship left intact in the underground docking bay, and I left. I did not have a plan. I had something better than a plan. I had patience, and I had nothing to lose, and I had the particular stubbornness that humans carry in their bones like a second skeleton. The nearest station was Kepler 9, 3 days out through empty space. I flew in silence. And I thought about everything I had ever learned about the Sulkai, which was not much, and I decided that the first thing I needed to do was learn more. Kepler 9 was a busy station, the kind of place where every species eventually passed through and nobody asked too many questions. I had been there many times before on supply runs, and I knew how to move through it without drawing attention. I found a corner in the main trading hall, and I sat there for 2 weeks, and I listened. What I heard was not encouraging at first. The Sulkai Empire had been expanding for 60 years. They had destroyed or absorbed over 40 colonies. Every faction that had tried to resist them had been broken quickly and quietly. They were organized, they were powerful, and they were completely certain that nothing in the outer systems could touch them. That certainty was the first crack I found. Because certainty makes you stop paying attention. And when you stop paying attention, you stop seeing the things building quietly in the spaces you are not watching. I started watching the spaces they were not watching. There was a Harathi settlement on the edge of Sulkai territory, 3,000 families living in aging ships because the Sulkai had taken their planet 11 years ago. They were angry and capable and completely without direction. I flew to them, and I sat with their council, and I told them what I was thinking. And by the end of the conversation, 2 of their commanders were leaning forward in their seats in the way people do when they have been waiting for someone to say something out loud that they have been thinking quietly for years. From the Harathi settlement, I flew to the independent trading routes on the Vithori run, where dozens of small operators had been bled dry by Sulkai tariffs for a decade. They did not need convincing. They needed organizing. I stayed for a week, and by the time I left, they had a shared communication channel and a list of supply routes that avoided every Sulkai checkpoint. From there, I flew to a research station called Delphi Point, where a Kelvari scientist named Orvan had spent 8 years documenting Sulkai war crimes in meticulous detail. He had more evidence than anyone knew what to do with, and nobody descended to who could do anything about it. He was a quiet, tired man who had been shouting into the dark for so long that he had almost stopped expecting anyone to hear him. I told him that was about to change. I spent 3 days at Delphi Point going through everything Orvan had collected, and what I found was extraordinary. Not just the crimes themselves, but the pattern underneath them. The Sulkai had been so confident for so long that they had stopped covering their tracks carefully. The evidence was thorough and clear and utterly damning, and all it needed was the right people to see it. We started building a way to make that happen. The first operation took 4 weeks to plan and 12 minutes to execute. A Sulkai supply depot on the edge of Harathi space, chosen carefully because it sat in the one gap in the eastern patrol route that nobody had noticed because nobody had been looking as carefully as I had been looking. The Harathi fighters hit it fast and clean. The traders ran communication interference exactly as planned, and Orvan's access codes opened the depot's security system without a single alarm. When it was over, and everyone was clear, and the reports started coming in that the Sulkai Eastern Command was scrambling to unders. And what had happened, I sat in my hauler in empty space, and felt something I had not felt since Varan 3. Like I was moving in the right direction. The second operation was bigger. The third bigger still. Each one built on the last, and each one brought new people into the network, because nothing convinces people that something is possible like watching it happen. Species that had never trusted each other were sharing intelligence. Factions with old arguments set them aside, because the enemy they shared was more important than the history between them. 8 months passed. 31 operations. And through all of it I flew the same routes in the same cargo hauler, unremarkable, and overlooked, moving through Sulkai space like something too small to bother with. They never saw me coming because they never looked at me twice, and I never stopped moving long enough for them to look once. The end, when it came, was quieter than I expected. Orvan's evidence finally reached 3 major neutral powers at the same time through 3 separate channels that I had spent 2 months carefully arranging. All 3 reviewed it together and issued a joint declaration within a week. Trade routes closed. Supply lines ended. The political ground that the Sulkai had stood on for 60 years simply stopped holding their weight, and the 31 operations had done something deeper than damage. They had shown every species in the outer systems that the Empire could be touched. That one person looking hard enough and refusing to stop could find the gap in the armor and put their hand through it. The High Command fell in 4 days. Not in a single battle. Thread by thread, until nothing was left to hold it together. I was 3 days out from Kepler 9 when I heard the news. Alone in my hauler in open space, running a supply route that I had flown 50 times before. I did not sell it. Brait, I sat for a long time and I thought about Varan 3, and about 12,000 people, and about my daughter learning to read in 3 languages because one was not enough. Then I thought about the Harathi families going home, about the traders flying free routes again, about Orvan, tired and quiet, finally being heard after 8 years of shouting into the dark. I set a course for Kepler 9. When I docked, Orvan was waiting on the platform, along with the Harathi commanders and the traders and a dozen others from the network. Nobody was celebrating loudly. It was quieter than that. More like people who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time, and had just been allowed to put it down. Orvalong looked at me with old eyes that held something new in them. "How did you know it would work?" he asked. I thought about the 4th morning on Varan 3. About the thing that had gone cold and quiet and certain inside me. About standing up out of the ashes with nothing left and finding out that nothing left is its own kind of freedom. I did not know, I said. I just knew I was not going to stop. He nodded slowly. Like that was the only answer that made sense. Behind us through the station viewport, the stars were the same as they had always been. Endless and indifferent and beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when you understand exactly how close you came to never seeing them again. I picked up my coffee, and I got back to work,